1931. A year when sound movies were still young. A time when studios specialized in specific genres. And an era where vampires weren't sparkling, abusive pedophiles. They still stalk you and they still stare at you weirdly, but they were still cool at least. This is Dracula. Dracula stars Bela Lugosi in the title role as Count Dracula of Transylvania. And the story's not complicated at all. It's Dracula just going to London, killing young women, or turning them into vampires. It's all good. Now this is part 2 in my review of every movie in this set. And during this period of time, studios specialized in specific genres. You'd have one studio specialized in comedies, you'd have another specialized in action movies. Universal's was obviously horror, because they now made famous their Universal Monsters line, which includes stuff like Frankenstein, Wolfman, and one of their earliest was Dracula. They've done some movies in the silent era with The Man of a Thousand Faces, Lon Chaney, including The Hunchback of Notre Dame, and the 1925 adaptation of Phantom of the Opera. Dracula was basically their first sound movie in Universal's monster lineup. It has a very creepy atmosphere, and the production design for Dracula's castle is pretty spectacular. And speaking of Dracula, Bela Lugosi is really good in this role. So creepy, so natural, and obviously his look is so famous that every pop culture thing of Dracula has imitated the Bela Lugosi look. And it's also very hard to look at him in other movies and not think of Dracula. His performance as Dracula was so iconic that when he passed away, he was even buried in the Dracula cape, which that is dedication, even in death. It's also got other good performances, especially from the actor who plays Dracula's slave, basically, Renfield, and the actor who plays Professor Van Helsing, who both of them would go on into Frankenstein and play very similar roles, where one's obviously the helper slave, and the other's a professor. Now, for 1931, this movie is really good, and I still think it's a movie that's really good and important. But for people seeing it for the first time in 2014, there are some issues that people would have to possibly prevent their enjoyment of it. For one thing, it's very quiet. There's no score. There's hardly any sound through a lot of the movie. And it usually can lead to some kind of weird moments because it's so quiet. Like, did somebody screw up? But again, you gotta keep in mind the limitations of sound in 1931, and the fact that sound movies were still kind of young, and it wasn't until something like King Kong where sound movies really started to pick up, to where every little frame of a film had sound features. So again, Dracula was still at a point where sound movies were still young and in their experimental stages. And for the slow moments in the movie, I think it works for the movie's atmosphere, but it also does make the movie feel a little longer than it actually is, which the movie's only an hour and 15 minutes, not even a full hour and a half. But as time went on, there was never a moment where I was like, okay, when's it gonna get to the end? It just went on its way, was very quiet, slow-paced, and then it ended, which I like. And the actor who plays Renfield, Dwight Frye, might come across as over-the-top and just silly for some people in today's audiences, but I think it works because it's the whole "yes, master" thing, which, again, has become as iconic as Dracula himself. All the stuff that I listed aren't really negatives for me. It's just like, yeah, that's a problem for today's movies, but for 1931, it's not bad at all. It's really good. It's worth seeing in your lifetime, especially if you're a film buff, and especially if you're into horror movies. Because this is one of the earlier horror movies. It's something you need to see. But if you are seeing this movie for the first time, and you come back to me saying, oh, I didn't like it because it was too quiet, too slow, it just was kind of silly, then I'm telling you right now, go into this knowing that it has some slow and very quiet moments. But if you come back to me saying, I still didn't like it, I'm like, okay, that's your opinion. I can completely understand, but don't say I didn't warn you. But again, it's worth seeing in your lifetime. Now, and that is my review for Dracula. Now, before I sign off, I should probably address the Spanish version of Dracula. Universal had this thing where they would make Spanish versions of their movies. See, where they would basically use the same sets but have different actors. I haven't seen the Spanish version of Dracula myself, or at least not yet. It's available on the set, but I'm kind of busy with school and plowing through these other movies, so I just don't have time to watch a different version of the same movie in this period of time. But maybe when I get to spring break or when I'm nearing the end of this review series, I'll go back and watch the Spanish version of Dracula and give you my opinion on it. But until then, leave a comment and tell me what you thought of Dracula. Subscribe to my channel for more stuff in the future. You can check out my other channel, AlexG8462. You can follow me on Twitter at AlexG8462. Follow me on Instagram at TheRealMrRobinson. And go like my Facebook page, /The Cinemas of Mr. Robinson. Share me with your friends and tell them about me. And remember to know it before you see it. This has been The Cinemas of Mr. Robinson, and I'll see you guys later.